All right, fantastic. Chris, kick us off.
Welcome, welcome. I'm Chris Daniel. I've been at EKU quite a while. I'm currently serving as Faculty Professional Development Manager for EKU Online and also teach instructional design in our program of instructional design. It's an MS program. With me in organizing and with me in presenting is Lisa Blue. Lisa, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. This is Lisa Blue. I'm an instructional specialist focusing on STEM H, teaching and learning, as part of the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning here at EKU.
Wonderful. So let's go ahead and get started.
So for our project, we decided to assume that we were an instructor teaching a course for the very first time. And we were going to use generative AI to create the assets needed for the first 3 weeks of an 8-week General Chemistry 1 course, using the technology wherever it seemed reasonable to do so. Once we were through the process, we wanted to assess the effectiveness of using GenAI to facilitate the course creation process between an instructional designer, Chris's role, and a subject matter expert, my role.
So next couple of slides are stream of consciousness. If you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend it. It's a 2013 Spike Jonze movie, and it's very prescient and almost eerie, like art imitating life, imitating art. It's called Her. It's a story of a sensitive guy in the middle of some personal crises who discovers an artificial intelligence operating system. I think that the system's name is Lisa, actually, which was a little weird too. There's a character named Lisa in that story, but he essentially develops a relationship with this technology that's far advanced, much more so than what we have currently. But I use this as a case in point to note a couple things. First of all, though, I'm kind of a little impatient with all the conversation around ethics and doom and gloom, and it's coming for our jobs, and I don't deny anybody their right to have those conversations, and certainly conversations around ethics and how we treat other people and what the overall aims of these technologies might be. I mean, that's definitely worthwhile. So I'm not suggesting that it's not, but I want to get in there and do stuff with the technology and try to make learning better. Part of my dissertation was instructional efficiency. So I'm always interested in how we can do, the same kinds of things more efficiently to improve learning outcomes. To me, it's a victory, even if we're not making grand changes, if we can make things more efficient, more helpful. But I always want to have key conversations with faculty, with other instructional designers around 3 key sort of concepts. What are the fundamental and powerful concepts of the course? What do we expect learners to know or be able to do far after they've taken the course? I'm also interested in what experiences we want them to have, what we want them to say they had as a result of taking the course. And then ultimately, we need to get down to those learning objectives because they are specific, they are measurable. To do a lot of this work in AI, I spent a ton of time, and I've been spending time with the AI, much to the kind of dismay of my wife. Like, I open up, if you have the paid version of GPT, you can open up the headphones icon and start having conversations. You can even have conversations in multiple languages and go back and forth between languages. I'm getting sidetracked, but the idea is that to really know what's going on, you have to immerse yourself in not only this, but some of the ancillary technologies. So that's kind of the first stream of consciousness. Second stream of consciousness is that I'm kind of approaching this with what I'm calling now a classic instructional design orientation, kind of revolving around 2 main concepts: concept of quality and the concept of community of inquiry. I use quality matters as sort of an anchor point for much of how I define quality, because there's specific and articulable aspects to course quality that I can explain and we can really look for in a course. The main point of which is the concept of alignment. Alignment is where we create sound, specific, measurable learning objectives at both the course and the unit level, make sure those are aligned, and then continue the alignment onto the materials, the assignments, the assessments, and the technology and tools that we use that should work in support of those objectives. Now, I know that's a big mouthful, and we could get down into it, but I'm always looking to make sure that we maintain integrity around alignment. So that's like one key concept. The other is the community of inquiry. Simply stated, an exceptional learning experience can be delivered to students where we have ample social, cognitive, and teaching presence. Sorry, I'm dealing with this frog in my throat. I'm trying to bang it down here as I talk, and it's not working too good. So we want to make sure that we have good teaching presence. The instructor is doing what they're supposed to be doing. We have the what's to be learned, what's worth knowing is in the course in very specific ways, and also that we have ample social presence. So with that in mind, I started doing a mental checkoff relative to the tools. I wanted a content creation engine. That's ChatGPT-4 for me. I want to create any of the images that you'll see here were created in Mid-Journey. I'm glad to show that briefly toward the end if anybody has not seen that yet. I needed speech to text because sometimes I want to speak, and that's not so much AI, but it's a form of AI. I'm using Microsoft's text to speak or speech to text functionality. I also be able to get image to text to describe images so that I don't have to spend a lot of time doing that myself. I can extract text from Snagit, and GPT can now process images. So I have ways to both extract actual text and get text descriptions from GPT. I also wanted a text to audio video solution. A little more on that later, but I arrived at a couple things. The text to audios or videos kind of creepy right now. And then if we needed to host anything, I needed a video host. Now that's all in addition to the learning management system.
So from there, we started with the very first task. We needed to write the objectives for the course. So I started off trying to work with open educational resources, and I gave the prompt, write the course objectives for a first semester college level general chemistry course using the atoms first approach. There are two main ways that you can attempt to teach general chemistry, either using the atoms first or the reactions first approach. And so I wanted to see how that would change the results up if I went atoms first versus reactions first. I didn't really like the results that I got too much, so I decided to go for my favorite resource, and I asked it to write course objectives for a first semester general chemistry course based specifically on Macmillan's Achieve platform, which uses the interactive general chemistry textbook. So not much changed on the atoms first versus reactions first, and it was obvious to me that the results were textbook agnostic. If you could go to the next slide. So when I got these General Chemistry 1 supposedly course objectives, you can see I've got this massive wall of text. So on the next slide, we can see how this really breaks down. I asked for just that first semester of general chemistry, but I got 2 semesters, a little bit of organic chemistry, and the laboratory component. So drilling down into that, this was a decent set of learning objectives for the course, steps 1 through 7. So on the next slide, I grabbed one of those learning objectives and then broke it down. So I looked at chemical bonding and I said, okay, investigate the types of bonds, including covalent, ionic, metallic, as well as the intermolecular forces, and apply these concepts. And so some of this does stray into general chemistry too. So you really do need that subject matter expert fine tuning to say, you got this a little bit wrong, AI, and to scale it back to a first semester general chemistry course. So on the next slide, I got this result, and parsing through these results, I realized that bullet point 2, analyze the bonding properties, had some glaring omissions. So this is this method of successive iterations. You just keep drilling down on the AI until you get the results that you need. So focusing on item 2 on the next slide, I prompted the AI to add learning outcomes covering what it missed specifically. So talk to me about polar bonds, nonpolar bonds, polar molecules, and nonpolar molecules. And ChatGPT said, certainly, here are some additional learning outcomes. And so this was really useful to me. Then on the next slide, you can see that once you have these general learning outcomes, then you can fine tune them using this prompt. So you can say in bold, write learning outcomes for, you can drop in a specific topic, and you can say, I want to do this at the remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing level of Bloom's taxonomy. And then you can drop in the appropriate Bloom's taxonomic verbs to get those learning outcomes. So you can repeat this for each level of Bloom's taxonomy, which is labor intensive at first, and you get a lot of information. But if you're building a course from scratch, or you want to do a total course refresh, this was really handy. So once we had our learning objectives in place, the next step was to generate our course map.
So let me talk and also say that there was a bit of simultaneous work I was doing relative to learning objectives and creating a course map, and that I was meeting quite a bit of roadblocks because I don't have that subject matter expertise, except I could define and identify some things. We'll talk about that as we go along. But I really love the concept of a course map. In the latest version of Quality Matters, version 7, it's a requirement. But in short, a course map is just it's a blueprint or visual representation of the course that lists the modules itself, the course objectives, the module objectives, and how the materials, activities, and assessments all work in support of that in a visual way. If you're a subject matter expert, you're working with somebody like me, an instructional designer, and we can create a cogent, like a clear, convincing, defensible course map, I can serve you very well in helping you flesh out your course if we can agree on this blueprint. And I love this one from New Mexico State. There's it's a great example, and there's a link to that if anybody wants to see how we do that. And if you work in EK Online, you're going to eventually get to a point where you'll create a course map with your subject matter, with your instructional designer. But so the essential points are identifying the course, writing the objectives, and identifying the modules and how you're going to sequence the learning, write objectives for those modules, and indicate aspects between.
So I think you hung
Materials,
up there.
activities, assessments.
Oh, there we go. Awesome.
Am I caught back up?
Yep.
All I need is an internet problem today. Did everybody get what I was talking about with course maps? They're really nice. That's the too long didn't listen. Okay, and we need them. And that's sort of the first part. But before that, I need to set the scene. So there are custom instructions in ChatGPT you can go into. It's sort of like an options menu, and you can tell it exactly what you want it to consider as you begin working. And so I just put in, I'm an instructional designer. You are going to be my subject matter expert, and reduce your chattiness. Maybe I should have been a little more scientific than that. And don't hedge answers. A lot of times it plays devil's advocate on things. I don't want all that. I just kind of want the facts. And I think it did a fair job. And then I just started talking, I told it what I was doing. I'm the instructional designer. We're building this general chemistry class, and let's keep rolling. One thing that I did is, in getting all the content in, I would ask it to pause and not give me any response when I put in whatever text it was, Lisa's learning objectives from the Excel spreadsheet that we were working from, whether it was snippets of the textbook. And I want to be very specific. I didn't put any actual Macmillan content into this GPT session, except the unit titles and subheadings and some of the learning objectives from the chapters. I felt comfortable doing that, even though I think that's probably okay, because you can find that stuff on Amazon. You can find it publicly. But I didn't want to go in and grab whole chapters and feed those in. I didn't feel like that would be an ethical use of the tool.
Yeah, we essentially worked off of the table of contents.
Yeah. And then eventually I'm asking it for that course map. Give me this course map, and here are the chapters. And I also was talking quite a bit about community of inquiry. Like, I'd tell it, like, social presence is really important. And I don't know where I got this social learning component, but in the course, in the table that I asked it to output, it started to include that. We eventually decided we didn't need the social learning component and can just build in social learning into the formative assessment in class or hybrid activities that we'd have this thing suggest to us. And so this is more of the first version of the course map. If you look at the learning objectives, notice they're not measurable. Like, recognize the steps for the scientific method. I guess that could technically be measurable, but I don't like that. That's not very specific. Demonstrate knowledge. That's a very poor learning objective. So, I started thinking, all right, I'm going to really need Lisa to weigh in on some of these things, but we'll ask it to be more specific. There was a refinement process that we did a few times to get 3 versions of this, this course map.
Yeah, Chris wanted the learning outcomes to be, if you could go back, he wanted them to be smart. I wanted them to be content heavy. And we also found that the GenAI, once again, tried to go way into Gen Chem 2. So in adjusting this, I deleted everything past a certain chapter, added a math review. It totally missed out that, hey, we need some basic math proficiency before we jump in with both feet on this course. And we decided to go back and change up the formative and summative assessment activities. All right, so then that gives us our next version. And so with this final version of the course map, I also went in and adjusted it and said, okay, 2 chapters a week isn't necessarily appropriate. Maybe this chapter could go a little quicker, but this chapter, if we split it right at this point, it makes more sense to kind of group this material in with this week and then start the next week with fresh material. And so some fine tuning from the subject matter expert was required. After that, though, I was able to turn Chris loose, and he did some amazing stuff in Blackboard.
First of all, let me give credit to IT and Gene Kleppinger, who is our learning management system administrator extraordinaire. We have had for about the last month, maybe longer, Gene can tell us probably to the date, this enhanced AI design functionality, which allows us to do some interesting things in terms of time-saving tasks within Blackboard. I could build part of the course structure through just some basic information that it already had about the course and a prompt that I designed. So what I ended up doing is jumping right in and asking ChatGPT to create a prompt that I could use back in Blackboard. So I basically said, all right, look, I've been in this session probably over 3 weekends. I don't know how many hours, just going back and forth, asking questions about chemistry, putting in learning objectives, getting more information, checking with Lisa about it. And I said, given everything I've entered, correct, construct this prompt that Blackboard LMS's new AI design assistant can use to create a course structure. It has no concept of what that is, but I explained essentially what that was, and it returned a prompt. I used that prompt to create 8 weekly modules. It gave decorative, sort of not really informative, but sort of decorative, well, how would you call the images? Just sort of anchor images and some basic descriptions. And so that's just a pretty nice feature and could save you a little bit of time in terms of creating that initial structure. One thing that was missing is something that we really believe in EKU Online, and that's having a start here section. It's a way to introduce students to the purpose of the course and gives them very specific information and instructions about how to get started in a course. It didn't give that. And of course, that's standard operating procedure. And with a lot of experience, I can crank that out pretty quickly. And so start here would be welcome message, task list in terms of getting started, the syllabus, a course map, important notes about that math education that students would need to have as a prerequisite before they began the chemistry course, and so on. So essentially the result was I got unit folders with images and descriptions, no underpinning content. So no specific content within that folder structure, which was fine. So I went back to AI. Hey, can you give me some content about a modular structure? What should we have? And it got really vague on me again. This is something that I'm noticing. Lots of people talked about GPT hallucinating. For me, I didn't get that very much, but I got amnesia. So after, 7, 10, 15 different exchanges, if we backed up and went to, something that I talked about maybe an hour ago, it would forget. I'm asking for learning objectives. I wanted actual learning objectives. And it just mentioned like, here, you need to put some good learning objectives. And so it kind of did that. I went back again and asked it to, hey, remember the things that we were talking about. And that seemed to be pretty effective. I still needed Lisa, though, because I wasn't really getting a lot of satisfaction relative to those important module learning objectives. And so I'm forgetting exactly what I was going to say here, but I think that's pretty much that's pretty much what I was trying to say. I needed Lisa really to weigh in because I had chemistry a million years ago and that was it. And
well, and at this point too, we noticed that we had to keep going back to the course map and making sure that everything was aligning. And so it was a lot of back and forth, making sure that everything was still continuing to line up, because we did have those periods of amnesia. And with that, we were ready for the best part. Some mid-journey eye candy here, because Chris will pay for it and I refuse to. So I just asked Chris to make all the pretty images. So after that, he moved on to assignment creation. And some of these assignments were pretty amazing. Chris actually got inspiration for this assignment from a graduate student in Florida. Chris, is that correct?
yeah, Rob Rose from University of North Florida gave an AECT presentation on how to create roles within discussion boards for higher metacognitive learning outcomes. And the idea is that you instead of giving the old post one and respond to two, I mean, everybody's supportive of that. I'm not sure why we still do it, except because that's the way we all have always done it. But create different roles given a particular prompt. And of course, you need some small teams to make that happen. But then you assign these roles, and then you have people interact with the prompt accordingly. And so I put that in as one of the assignments once we started talking more about what kinds of assignments we might like to have, both asynchronously and synchronously, or in a face-to-face class. And this is one thing that it returned.
Right. And so this one was really fantastic. But then when we looked at other assignments, we saw that, well, yeah, GenAI is still having trouble with math. Log of 100 is not one. And another assignment, the assignment just was not robust enough, nor did I feel like it covered the material that was appropriate to setting the stage for a study of a General Chemistry 1 course. And some of the concepts were just plain old college algebra and not relevant for the course. And so other assignments were not so great. But also, on the next slide, because we were not violating any copyright rules, we were missing all this incredible content in this Achieved by Macmillan interactive textbook, which was really unfortunate, but how would it know? And so I was hoping that maybe the GenAI would hit on some of the widely available World Wide Web content, such as PhET simulations. These PhET simulations saved my hide during COVID, when I couldn't have students in class doing active learning activities as a group. And so I could have them go in and work with these PhET simulations and then discuss the results and the learning and what they found. And so I was disappointed that it missed out on that, but we're also learning how to prompt. So that may be part of it. So Chris did have some success with generating quizzes, again, using Blackboard.
So Blackboard has a syntax to create a text-based file and for quiz questions, and import that file directly into your quiz canvas or test canvas. Now, this is a Blackboard Ultra feature. And so I was able to train it on that exact syntax and say, I need 20 questions covering chapters 1 through 3. And, give me multiple choice, true, false, and matching questions. And it could do that. And I can show you a process if anybody's interested, if you're an Ultra user. That page that explains the syntax is very good. But as Lisa said, it sometimes gave some wonky questions. And B, I had to retrain this sucker 4 or 5 times to get it to sit up and beg like I wanted it to, after a time where I would enter more content. And so I'm also, like, one of the questions that I'll talk about later is, like, how can we kind of get around that? But I was able to generate a lot of questions. One solution we kind of thought about is, if we were creating a midterm or a final exam, let's just overpopulate the question pool and then have the subject matter expert call out the bad questions. And but anyway, it worked reasonably well. Let me talk quickly about rubric generation. Blackboard's AI rubric generator, the first day I started to use it, came up with myriad error messages. So I found a really great rubric generator.
You're froze up again, Chris.
Terrible.
So,
how about now?
There you go. All good.
All right, let's pray to the connection gods to sustain us here. It's saying my connection's unstable. Can you all still hear? I'm going to go off. video. Maybe that will help with my bandwidth.
There we go. Thanks, Chris.
So, yeah. So Magic School AI is a repository of about 60 different tools for teachers. And it's a great, you can get started for free. Give it a try. It has a fantastic rubric generation tool. Now, you can't directly use that with Blackboard. And eventually the Blackboard rubric AI generator started working and did a very reasonable job with that. And I don't know if we have a screen with that, but
I
no.
do not.
So, okay, well, that's fine. But if it knows your content and you give it a sufficient prompt, it does a very good job. I recommend anybody to go in, let IT give you the role where you can use some of these AI tools, and then you can put in the text of your assignment, and it will give you back a very reasonable rubric, or at least give you some ideas. If you don't want to mess with the Blackboard tool, you can go to Magic School AI and get that done pretty quickly, and it's really great for thought. Also asked it to generate a syllabus. I asked ChatGPT to generate a syllabus. It did a very perfunctory job with syllabi. It did give me some good content that I used one of my own syllabus templates to fill in, but it did not, after like asking it, all right, we need all the good things that are in a syllabus. It just couldn't deliver. And also there are some institutional specific elements that we have to have. There's no way for it to know those. So I really recommend using it for specific passages, but it's not going to spit you out a mostly complete syllabus that's ready to go. And I don't think really anybody expected that. It's just an experiment I wanted to try.
Because we were trying all the things.
And so some of those final tasks were, so I wanted to do some text to video, and I've got a thing to show you if you're interested in seeing that. I used a product called Hygiene. Let me see if I can break out of
yeah, go ahead and show that. It's too funny.
Why wasn't that queued right? That should have been queued right up, folks. All right, there it is. So I asked it to generate a course introduction based on some work. It did a really good job of that and making it very personal. I trained it on several of Lisa's professional pages that were at her previous institution and here, and it did a great job. And I fed it into Hygiene, which is a mostly paid. It gives you a little bit of free access, but it's mostly a paid platform. And it gave this very creepy result, but not awful, just creepy.
Not because I'm creepy, but it's creepy.
Dive through this fascinating world of atoms, molecules, and the fundamental processes that shape our universe. From my own academic journey at Missouri State University to my varied experiences ranging from a cheese chemist at Kraft to studying uranium speciation at Washington University in St. Louis.
And I'm sure you all have seen things that are very similar to this, if not on social media, short posts, other places. But I believe this technology will become more useful and a little less creepy. Now, how much we want to rely on that, I'm not sure. Probably not a whole lot, but it's something out there. So these are just thoughts after working a whole bunch of hours, and I spent much more time sort of sandboxing things than I did output, although I spent quite a bit of time on output. I do think we could get an efficient approach to creating certain aspects of course design using GPT and some of the other tools. I'm not sure how I feel about generic prompts in general. Lots of people are in the prompt writing, and some are even selling these. I'm not so sure how functional that's going to be when we get down to your individual needs as a subject matter expert or instructional designer. I'm still thinking about that. I'm wondering how use of various sessions and maybe utilizing certain programmatic aspects in Python to interface with GPT using their API, how that might work. And I'm starting to look at some of those processes. And there's full documentation on the OpenAI website when you go into the programming interface section. ChatGPT forgot a lot of things. It had amnesia. It had amnesia about generating quiz questions, about the course map, about learning objectives, and I had to constantly remind it. So one thing I'm thinking of, like what I want to start experimenting with, is can I have a really good, useful session and then ask it to give me a summary of that session that might be usable in a new session, or to refresh or remind AI, what we were doing, and would that have any kind of effect on productivity? So that's where my brain is sort of going, and I'm love to hear your all's comments. I think I've said everything. I've spent a lot of hours, but finally, when we started dialing it in, I think we would have saved some time. If I were to do this again, I think I would save quite a bit of time. Lisa,
yeah. By the end of it, we were completing a task and then saying, wow, that would have taken me an hour. It took me 5 minutes. And so once we had gone through and spent the time working with the different AIs, I think that learning curve, once we achieved that learning curve, it did start paying off for us. And I think really it was a super ambitious project. I mean, this is a passion project for both Chris and I, in that we wound up doing this on nights and weekends because we've got other duties. This isn't an other duty as assigned. This is, we're so fascinated with it, we can't stop playing with it. It's kind of a situation because we want to figure this out so we can share this information with others. And so we're still learning how to interact with the generative AI. And because we're still learning, what prompts work, that was a significant time sink because we've got to learn how to use the tech. And then the GenAI technology itself is evolving rapidly. And I see Matt here has a question. Matt is asking, what happens if you ask GPT what topics in a course students have the most trouble with? You want to tackle that, Chris?
Well, I think it's reasonable to do that. And I think that if nothing else, it's going to give you some ideas. Certainly as a subject matter expert, you can or a faculty member, you can compare your own experience and course evaluations and perhaps talking with others. It's certainly good for idea generation. Now, I don't know if it's going to cite any specific studies. And I always worry about, like, if we're asking it for something, if we're asking it to pull from the academic literature, that may be problematic. But there are other technologies. Dan Florell in psychology was telling me about an AI service that taps directly into academic literature. And so I got to get the name of that. And when I do, I'll get back in touch. But that may be a solution, is to ask that question of AI that's trained on academic literature and not just the entirety of the internet.
Right. And to speak to that, I know that whenever I've had lessons or activities that haven't gone over very well in the past, if you take that learning objective and drop it into ChatGPT and say, suggest an active learning opportunity that would help students develop a deeper understanding of this topic, that's good for idea generation as well. Brett mentions he's queried ChatGPT as to critical threshold concepts for courses, and he's found that it does a pretty good job. Fantastic. Glad to hear that. So in summary, though, if we move to the next slide, I think what we're fighting against is that we're seeing that the frontier of AI capabilities is an ever-moving target. And it's hard to know if we're inside that frontier of what the AI is fully capable of doing and understanding, or if we're pushing it outside the frontier. Now, is that because we're waiting on the tech to catch up, or are we trying to understand better prompt engineering? And, we've done zero shot, few shot, chain of thought prompting. We're telling the AIs to take a deep breath and work this problem step by step to improve the accuracy with which it solves and describes math and physics problems. It still fails miserably in both of those areas. And so we're constantly we're just going to keep pushing this frontier. And the next slide. The other problem is that the influx of new tools that come online daily is just like trying to sip gingerly from a tidal wave. It's kind of tough. Everybody's got an AI they're trying to sell these days. And does the AI perform as you really need it to, or is it just more whiz and bang than what you actually need? Let's see. Brad also mentions that it's important to omit any identifiable information to keep students and your identity safe. That is an important point to note. And we're seeing just in the last 2 weeks that AIs are actually able to infer important information about you, such as gender and potential location and age group, just by the nature of the queries that you pose to the AI. So that's also something to consider.
Oh, let me also mention in image generation, I saw quite a bit of gender bias.
Yes.
Lots of white males being depicted as scientists and chemists, and
Yes.
I would have to adjust prompts accordingly. So it's
Right.
interesting to see that.
And there are some safety rails in place. Like I tried to make a cartoon caricature of my image so that, you know, I need an updated avatar, you know, and it said, oh, no, we can't do faces at this time because that we're protecting your personal information. I'm like, you know what? That's fair. Chris has already made me walk and talk and do crazy things on LinkedIn. We'll call that a day. So with that, we have several. Chris, do you think you got all the tools listed here? I mean, we played with so much.
Yeah, the main ones are these. GPT-4 is what I used. Midjourney. Lisa used Bing Enhanced Search and GPT-3 3.5, and as well as through Bing. The Blackboard AI Assistant. I think as they add features and functions, that's going to be a really nice targeted tool set for people designing courses or just thinking about how they want to do course design. Use Google Bard a little bit. Magic School AI. Hey Jen to do the creepy text to video. There are a bunch of tools. You can just search for text to video on Reddit and get lots more suggestions for lots of different purposes. Also used Adobe Express for some of the image generation. It's in beta, but it does a reasonable job. If anybody wants to see any of those things, I'm glad to kind of show them.
And with that, we do have plenty of time. So if you all have questions or comments, the rest of the time is open for that. We'll take those now. Feel free to unmute yourself or drop it in the chat. And if nobody has questions, Chris is going to keep playing that creepy Hey Jen video.
Let's not torture people that way. Let's torture them a different way.
Okay, sounds good.
And this is Gene Kleppinger. I just
Hi,
have a comment about my own use of ChatGPT this semester for teaching beginning ethics. And I did not have it available. I did not use generative AI to construct the course, but all of my assignments to my students are based around making sure they understand what ChatGPT can do for them, how to interpret it. I haven't done much with the ethical concerns because basically the course is about ethics and I don't need to, I can give it as an example. But basically I've been able to grab nice things from ChatGPT and make them comment on them. And so that's been a good use in my own course.
Wonderful. Can we go back to the first course objective slide?
Yes.
Let's see. Max, was it the first wall of text? Was that the one you were looking for? One of the first two. So probably the before that. That one. Yeah. What questions did you have about that, Max? And I can send us, I'll send out these slides too at the conclusion of the webinar so everybody can have those for future reference. All right. Thank you, Benny, for the comment. I appreciate that. Thank you too, Brett. We had a lot of fun working on this. Tiffany, you're welcome. You're welcome, Sarah. Yeah, if there's anything we can send you guys, or if you have questions that pop up after the webinar, I'll send out a summary of what we talked about, the slides, a link to resources, and feel free to hit Chris or I up with questions. Yes, we will send